Hi, this is a very brief session, but so we are focusing on humanitarian impact evaluation. So, if, for instance, you've let's say distributed food, you have maybe provided shelter, or maybe done cash transfers as interventions, or whatever kind of humanitarian interventions that you have done, whatever kind of humanitarian action, whether it is uh, through preparedness or mitigation processes or during emergency or after disaster or crisis, whatever, uh, any humanitarian action that has been done. Of course, there is a certain target or certain goals that that particular action must achieve. Okay, or what certain change that is intended to be created. Okay, and that's the impact. So, and of course, if you look at the evaluation criteria, you'll see that impact is part of the evaluation criteria. Okay, so in this session, we are briefly looking at the impact evaluation. We're not going to go deep into details because you realize that the methods, the systematic approaches, analysis of data, whatever we've been talking about in the previous sessions, are all applicable in the impact evaluation. Okay, except that here the questions, the evaluation questions are more more directed to assessing the kind of change that has been created by certain humanitarian action. So we are focusing on impact evaluation of humanitarian action, importance of impact evaluation of humanitarian action, and planning impact evaluation, and then some approaches and designs for impact evaluation. Okay, reminding ourselves again that at the end of the day, the whole idea of systematic, objective, impartial examination of humanitarian action is to draw lessons and improve policy and practices and enhance accountability. Okay, so the whole idea is that you're doing a humanitarian impact evaluation to be able to, maybe you want to understand for scaling, you want to understand what changes have been made. Maybe you want to scale up the intervention, or you want to see how it works in certain particular contexts and the changes that are made in certain contexts and so on. Okay, so impact evaluation has to do with impacts, but then what are impacts? We remind ourselves. Okay, remember the other concepts that we talked about: inputs, uh, outputs, outcomes, and then impacts. So impacts are at the goal level. Okay, and these are mostly beyond the control of the humanitarian actors within a particular agency, that they are beyond control of the humanitarian action managers and so on. Okay, so the higher you move away from inputs, outputs towards achievement of goals or impact, the lesser the control of the changes that could be attributed to that particular intervention. Okay, so these are wider effects of an intervention on individual groups, communities, institutions, and even country level, and so on. Okay, consider, for instance, if the intervention, humanitarian interventions, were part of the humanitarian programs in Yemen, okay, or in Syria, considering that they have bigger crisis happening. So it could be that maybe certain humanitarian programs are creating wider changes within the entire country. So you could even have those impacts at a country level. So impacts could be micro, meso, and macro. So they can be also positive or negative. So in other words, intended or unintended. They can be short or long term. So in this case, when we talk about impact evaluation, we're looking at evaluating all those wider effects that have been created or that are resulting from humanitarian action. Okay, at project level or program level or policy level. Okay. So why do we do impact evaluation why impact in evaluation of humanitarian action? So, of course, humanitarian action operates in different a whole range of environments, a whole range of contexts, and then this wider context involves interrelated factors that sometimes make situations for achieving impacts more complex and so on. And that is why even when it comes to doing evaluation for humanitarian action, we are more considering attribution contributions rather than attribution. Okay. Uh, we also want to look at to explore cause effect kind of inferences, but again it is difficult in this case doing attributions in terms of causal effect if you specifically want to look at the value of a certain intervention. But nevertheless, we must look at whether our intervention or humanitarian action has contributed to certain changes that are being observed or noticed. So want to add to look at of course the challenge is that again I talked about attribution is that the dynamics of the operational environment has many factors, many actors, and all those have different motives, interests, and all kinds of influences on the evaluation on the humanitarian action. Okay, and again sometimes the availability of data from baseline is also not available. So how do we plan the impact evaluation? So consider the following: the aim of why is evaluation being done? What is it? Is it the appropriate time, or maybe you are doing it too early that you might not notice the changes, or you are doing it long enough after closure of the intervention that you would not notice that the intervention is the one that contributed to those changes. Budgetary resources, evaluation skills of the team. So consider all those other factors that we've looked at in the previous sessions regarding the general evaluation of humanitarian action. Okay, so you have the different approaches and designs, could be quasi-experimental or non-experimental, depending on whatever kind of impact you want to look at. If, for instance, they are small projects and you want to test the kind of changes the kind of impact they can make, you can maybe use experimental or quasi-experimental, and then you follow it up and then see how certain changes are being made. And then, of course, there is theory-based approaches that you can use, or case-based approaches, or longitudinal studies that you can implement over a long period of time, and then you keep studying how things are changing or what changes are being made at individual level, policy level, or whatever. And then after, you can test whether maybe those impacts can be sustained or not. Okay. You could again look at qualitative or quantitative kinds of changes, number of maybe schools that were built, and in terms of, and then again versus the completion rates and enrollment rates of maybe certain individuals or the affected persons. You do qualitative to look at maybe satisfaction with the outcomes of a certain intervention. So each of the designs or methodologies has its potential constraints and I mean has its potentials and constraints, or disadvantages and advantages. And for designs, methods, and sampling, you can again revisit the previous sessions in session 7 for how the designs can be looked at. Like I said at the beginning of this session, I said that we are not digging too much because the whole process, systematic process, objective process that we've been looking at, the designs, the methods, and the rest are the same, except that here you are more concentrating on, or you are only focusing on testing the general changes that your evaluation has, or your intervention humanitarian action has created. So who can be part of the evaluation? All project stakeholders. Think about the affected people, think about the donors, think about the in-country representatives, think about the sectors related to that particular program and so on. Consider participatory approaches because it is very important that you understand the experiences of the affected persons. Consider ethical and rights perspectives when selecting participants and when reporting certain information. So it's all even when collecting data from certain participants. Okay. See, for instance, session 8 on engaging the affected persons within the evaluation. Some essential questions for who to engage and why. Is the purpose to ensure that the voices of those who are affected are captured in the findings and recommendations? Is it to ensure that is it to ensure a relevant evaluation focus? Is it to hear people's own versions of change? Is it to build ownership of donor funded, which and in that case that is related to accountability purposes and so on. So these questions can guide you on why you need to do the impact evaluation. Again, remember the purpose for why general evaluation is done: learning or accountability. So the questions for why impact evaluation should be done should also relate to those particular purposes. Some key terms for you to note: impact evaluation, confidential, counterfactual. Again, remember when we were talking about null hypothesis and so on, but also ask the questions of asking yourself, what would the changes be if this intervention was not there, or what changes have happened following the intervention. Okay, so counterfactual and so on, but also related to your baseline, that it is very important. It is difficult to measure impact if there is no baseline. Okay, but if you refer to for instance, the real world evaluation, you may also look at those aspects of why the scenarios. Bamberger gives those scenarios when in his theory or model of real world evaluation, that there are two scenarios. For instance, the baseline data is not there, but then the managers want to test impact, or maybe the baseline was not done before implementation, and then the idea of getting such information is thought about after implementation is done. So all those are key challenges that one might consider, and then making sure that they use certain measures to counter them, to be able to measure the impact that has been achieved. Intervention groups, control groups, randomized control trials, and other sorts of designs. For your review, you can look at what a counterfactual is and why is it important. Differences between experimental, quasi-experimental, and non-experimental impact evaluation designs, and some common threads to impact evaluation, but also based on a specific humanitarian intervention. How will you face in impact evaluation? Some readings to help you on understanding more about impact evaluation. You can visit these, and especially if you visit, for instance, UNICEF or Beta Evaluation, you have more information on how to implement your impact evaluation. Thank you.